Hey everyone, why are we putting up with this?
Oh my fucking God! Run down! Run down!
I'm Rich Lowry of National Review, and that's video of a brawl at a Chipotle in the Navy Yard section of Washington, D.C. that went viral. And obviously, this kind of incident has no place in an orderly society. We shouldn't tolerate it, and we don't have to tolerate it. We just need to pursue the right kind of tough-minded policies to stamp this kind of thing out. I'm going to describe what those are and how ridiculous the opposition is to the kind of measures that would stop this kind of thing from happening. Now, that video went viral. One, because obviously a crazy scene, right? It looks like a saloon fight staged in a Wild West movie. And also, we saw innocent bystanders cowering in a corner. Now, one of those bystanders was a father who just happened to be there with his kids because he'd taken them to a Nationals game. The Nationals ballpark is right there in the vicinity. Saw the Orioles versus the Nationals, ends up at this Chipotle. And then this happens. And he talked about just how harrowing it was.
So at that point, I tell the children, come on, get with me, get up, to start backing up. And then it was like an ambush. My son said on the way home, said, Papa, the problem is I can't unsee that. Those individuals have now directly impacted my security, my life. My children are now talking about, like, I never want to go to Chipotle again, right?
Now, this kind of incident is very bad for innocent bystanders, as that clip brings home. It's also terrible, there are innocent bystanders as well, for the people working at that Chipotle, who tend to be young kids, who are minorities, who are doing the right thing because they are showing up to do an honest day's work, and they're subjected to this crazy scene. It's also, by the way, bad for the kids engaged in the brawl. They might hurt one another. And obviously, this kind of thing is the predicate for even worse criminality to come. So this simply can't be tolerated. But these kind of so-called teen takeovers, we're seeing them across the United States. We've seen them in Norfolk, Virginia. We've seen them in Detroit. We've seen them in Chicago. And we've seen this takeovers in all sorts of other places as well. So if we return to Washington, D.C., how do we deal with this? Well, the U.S. attorney down there, Jeanine Pirro, former Fox News host, to her credit, is taking it very seriously and says she wants to prosecute parents involved in these kind of takeovers. Now, I appreciate that impulse, but as a practical matter, the overwhelming majority of these kids probably only have a mom in their house, in their home, maybe a grandmother in their life as well, and they can't control these kids. I think in the majority of cases, they would if they could, but they're not physically capable of it. There's no father in the home. So I think threatening them and going after them is of limited utility, but there are all sorts of other practical, relatively easy measures we can take to stop this kind of activity. As Charles Lehman of the Manhattan Institute points out, perhaps my favorite crime expert in the United States of America, by the way, all you need to do, enforce a curfew, ban masks, prosecute juveniles as adults when they commit violent offenses, detain violent offenders pending trial, and use civil injunctions to shut down criminal groups. These kind of measures have been used before. They've worked other places. They need to be used now. But again, in Washington, D.C., you have opposition to doing this sort of thing, including opposition to a curfew. A leading candidate for mayor down there, a socialist named Janice Lewis George. This is her rationale for opposing a curfew.
You know, I voted against the extended youth curfew because I actually went down to Navy Yard, and as when you come up the escalator, what our young people are seeing, 10-year-old, 9-year-olds, 12-year-olds, are seeing individuals with guns on them, and they are questioning and enforcing the curfews on our young people. Here's the thing, a curfew is a tool, and you gotta determine when you use a tool, whether it's the smartest thing to do in that moment. Right now, we have federal law enforcement officers on our streets from various agencies. They are not trained in de-escalation. They are not accountable to DC taxpayers and oversight of the council. And so the risk is a very real risk, harm to our children, harm that could result in death to our children.
Now you're listening to that, and she talks about these young kids, 9, 10-year-olds, seeing individuals with guns, and it's with the implication it's a very bad thing, and you think she's going to be talking about gangbangers or something. No, she's talking about law enforcement officers with guns. She is of the mindset that any interaction between law enforcement and teens is a bad thing, when the fact is the law enforcement does need to interact with certain segment of teenagers, either to hustle them along, tell them to go home, or to arrest and detain them if they are guilty of crimes and a threat to the rest of the community. Here's more, by the way, from Janice.
As an executive, you have to decide which tools you use and when you use them. And right now, using the curfew as a tool for our young people is dangerous. It is dangerous because we have federal troops who are in our city.
Again, the presumption there is that law enforcement is a threat to the community instead of these unruly, lawless individuals who threaten everyone else and prey on everyone else. The fact is, in places like Washington, D.C., it's a very small minority of repeat offenders already known to authorities who drive the overwhelming majority of crime. If you can deter them, if you can detain them by focusing on them in particular, you make the rest of the community safer for everyone else. And this is an approach, by the way, that has had success now in places you wouldn't necessarily expect. San Francisco, for instance, used to be a watchword for chaos, still not perfect, but has gotten much better by adopting common sense measures on crime. It used to be that car break-ins were a huge endemic problem in San Francisco that were considered just an inevitability of urban life. Everyone thought you just can't do anything about this. You just have to accept it. It was called bipping. You break the window of the car and you grab whatever's inside. The shards of glass on sidewalks and pavement that you'd see all the time are called San Francisco diamonds. Residents of San Francisco put up signs in certain areas warning tourists, whatever you do, don't leave anything in your car because someone's going to break in and steal it. And lo and behold, San Francisco decided to do something about this and actually has succeeded. 86% decline since 2023 in these car break-ins. First 3 months of this year compared to the first 3 months of 2025, such break-ins are down 50%. And what did cops do? They began to deter and detain the people committing these crimes. They'd set bait cars that looked like a very alluring target. Then when the thieves would break in, the cops would be right there. They'd arrest them. They used technology, cameras, drones to track the folks who are committing these sort of crimes, and they've put a lot of them behind bars, and now San Francisco cars are a lot safer than they used to be. What was the beginning of wisdom here? Well, in San Francisco and a lot of other jurisdictions around the country, it began with getting rid of their progressive prosecutor, an absurd guy named Chesa Bodine, ousted in 2022. They elected a new mayor with a better attitude towards crime, who appointed a pretty good police chief. And it just shows if you arrest people, crime goes down. And you've seen a decline in all sorts of other offenses in San Francisco. Again, not perfect. Same thing is true of Baltimore. Baltimore had just 4 homicides this year, the lowest number since the current tracking began in 1970. Homicides over the last decade, fallen. Robberies over the last decade, fallen. What did Baltimore do? It got rid of a progressive prosecutor and then began to focus in a serious way on repeat offenders. And it's worked. Again, not a perfect place, but much better than it was. It's no longer the famously crime-ridden city depicted in the great TV series, The Wire. The big takeaway here is that order is not inevitable. It's not spontaneous. It needs to be insisted on and enforced and protected from what's usually a pretty small group of malefactors who will threaten it, who will blight certain areas, who will create a sense of chaos and engage in violence. It is within our power to stop them, and we have to stop them. Now, it's certainly true that the overall crime trend in this country has been quite favorable for several years now. That's a fantastic thing, but it doesn't mean that we still don't have problems, and it doesn't excuse places like Washington, D.C. from actually doing what's necessary to stop this sort of chaos. Hey, do yourself a favor, comment, like, and subscribe. I guarantee you won't regret it. I'm Rich Lowry, over and out.